It's said that Kevin Bacon is separated from all other actors by only 6 degrees. While that's not strictly speaking true, it might be interesting to explore the interconnectedness of the film industry. At any rate, it's probably a good jumping-off point for a movie review YouTube channel. With that in mind, welcome to the 6 Degrees Movie Review Marathon. Before we start, a note about the rules. Each film must share one actor or actress with a previous film in the series. Film franchises are excluded from the potential choices, because each of those might have its own video series in the future. For my purposes, a franchise will be defined as a trilogy or longer set of connected movies. Sequels will be allowed in this series, though they can't be viewed consecutively. The goal of this marathon is to create as long a chain of films as possible, without using the same connection twice. Shall we begin? The Last Duel was sabotaged by its third act, which focused on the perspective of Marguerite de Carouge, played by Jodie Comer. I chose her as the connection to the next film for lack of a better term, redemption. There was nothing particularly wrong with her acting in the film. The third act writing was the problem. But I wanted to see if these are the only types of roles she picks. The next entry in the marathon is the 2021 video game comedy titled Free Guy. Video evidence that game you can't beat is cheating against you, just as you suspected. Free Guy tells the story of a non-playable character, or NPC, in a soon-to-be-defunct massively multiplayer online game called Free City. The NPC, named Guy, becomes self-aware and begins playing the game in a way that wasn't intended by the development company. The game allows players to commit a slew of different crimes to earn in-game currency for customizations. Guy starts out as a teller in a bank robbery scenario. But when he sees a player whom he recognizes as the girl of his dreams, he begins to divert away from his programming by following her, hoping to help her with her secret agenda. The player, Molotov Girl, believes that he has hacked the game to look like an NPC, and tells him that if he can reach level 100, she will consider asking for his help. That's when Guy begins to level up, not by completing the crime missions, as the game intended, but by stopping the crimes and taking the other players' weapons away. Through trial and error, he becomes very proficient, very quickly, which earns him a social media following of people questioning how they have played the game before this. Meanwhile, Molotov Girl, whose real name is Millie, is looking for evidence that the Free City game is built on top of her own game, which was stolen by the Tsunami Studio CEO, Antoine. Antoine initially enjoys the attention Guy receives, until it starts cutting into the profits for his upcoming sequel game. And when he discovers that Millie is snooping around for evidence of his misdeeds, he becomes erratic and starts sabotaging the game, both in its software and in its hardware. Free Guy presents a refreshingly self-aware take on the state of video games. The game allows players to live out elaborate fantasies, but most players are more likely to sabotage each other or create mayhem than to complete the missions. I mean, there's surprisingly few successful bank robberies in this movie. Then we have people randomly jumping in place, or slamming themselves into walls. And they all seem completely confounded at someone who plays the game differently than they do, despite none of them really playing the game as intended. We have eccentric mods, hackers intent on exploiting bugs in the programming, a money-grubbing company that doesn't understand the audience at all, hello Disney, meet irony, and The Social Network-esque story of stolen intellectual property. The dialogue reflects the best and worst of the gaming industry in a fun, non-preachy way. Things are the way they are, accepted even when not acceptable. This story is structured around the tried-and-true hero's journey formula. Guy is called to adventure by his desire to fall in love with Millie. He receives the glasses that show him the truth of the world. He is challenged to reach a level of competence, the path to which is painful. He faces an existential crisis when a harsh truth is revealed to him, as well as the threat of overturning the entire world. He denies the call to heroism, through no fault of his own in this case, but must be convinced to take on the heroic task. He literally goes beyond the bounds of his world to achieve his purpose, succeeds, and gains wisdom, which he shares with the others when the world settles back to normal. Millie goes through her own version as well, as do Keys and Buddy and even the coffee NPC. It's a set of simple stories, but it doesn't really need more than that, and it executes everything fairly well, despite some serious logical problems stemming from the characters. Where the film begins to fail is in the lesson it wants to impart. This is admittedly fertile ground for thematic development, but the film tries to do too much, shifting its focus over and over without really exploring anything in depth. As far as I can tell, it wanted to address the nature of love, love's effect on decision-making, the bliss of ignorance versus the dangers of the unknown, the pitfalls of challenging the status quo, the paralyzing effect of fear of the unknown, the dangers of inaction, the power of collective actions, the importance of other people, the nature of life, the nature of free will, the nature of reality, and the value of reality. None are adequately developed. Many are encapsulated in single sentences to acknowledge the possibility that these themes could be explored in a movie like this. but the film moves on from them so quickly you almost forget that it didn't even try. Personally, I would have enjoyed a better examination of finding meaning through small moments within personal relationships, even if they seem insignificant on a grander scale. This was the lesson that reversed the Act 2 low point, but it might have been nice to see it expanded to apply to the interactions between the players and the NPCs, or between multiple players. After all, Guy's crisis is that he believes his actions don't matter, but do the players' actions in the game matter? This theme could have bolstered some commentary on the value of multiplayer gaming in developing personal social connections, especially among those who are otherwise isolated. Or it could be a warning about how a game that encourages sabotaging the other players defeats the purpose of multiplayer, and can expand a negative mindset into the wider world. It could even have had that dreadfully illogical message that violent video games cause real-world violence, though I'm quite thankful that that poorly thought-out garbage theory appears in neither the text nor the subtext of the film. Anyways, this is just one element of many that could have sustained the entire story by itself. The film doesn't service this or any specific message, though, because the producers can't seem to decide what they truly want to say. I don't blame them necessarily, but it definitely loses some points. I'll give the story a 6 out of 10. The character work is a bit of a mixed bag. In Guy, we see a wide-eyed, wholesome digital man stuck in an inescapable life cycle. His romantic attraction to Molotov Girl, a woman essentially from a different social caste, causes him to question not only the hierarchy of his society, but also the nature of reality itself. As he progresses as a player, he focuses his growth in areas that he believes will attract her attention, but he never abandons his deeply held principles or overall optimism about the world, faltering only briefly when he discovers that he isn't real. He overcomes his own inadequacies and chooses to stand up for his world and its inhabitants. And through his journey, he comes to understand his place in his world, which still might provide him happiness even if it can't include the girl of his dreams. He's the most solid of the characters, and Ryan Reynolds provides, well, the same kind of portrayal I've come to expect from him since Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. It works pretty well here, though. Guy's security guard friend, Buddy, serves as a foil to him. He is the most reluctant to diverge from his preset action tree. He's the most afraid of changing. However, his contentment with the status quo allows him to solve Guy's existential crisis, and the logic of his perspective encourages him to face his own fears. He helps within his own skill set, especially given his inability to use a gun, and sacrifices himself to help Guy complete his task. Not exactly Samwise Gamgee, but really, who is? Millie, aka Molotov Girl, may be a skilled player of Free City and an intelligent coder of AI systems, theoretically, but her character is at the center of a black hole of logical issues. Let's go through a few. Tsunami and Antoine stole her game's coding and used it for Free City, so she's suing. Sounds okay, except that the game is going offline forever in 3 days. So what took her so long? They're shutting down Free City because its sequel is coming out, but video games take years to develop even with big teams. And no company in its right mind shuts down a game that's still massively popular and profitable, which Free City obviously is, though I suppose Antoine isn't exactly rational, but I'll get to that. So she must have had years to file her lawsuit, but she chose to wait until the months or weeks prior to the game becoming defunct, and her entire case being dismissed as moot, to actually file it? And she's looking for the evidence of the stolen coding by being a player? That's not exactly the best strategy, and a coder would know that. Also, shouldn't she find the evidence before she sues? Seems like an expensive proposition to pay the lawyers to sit and wait for you to give them what they need, if it even exists. Also, the evidence she wants exists outside the game. The player that has the incriminating video is a streamer, and you don't stream to nothing. It's also a proud moment for that player, having found the bug, so he certainly has it saved elsewhere on his computer. Molotov Girl doesn't escape the logical issues either. She shoots a player for asking about her goals, but then tells them openly to Guy. And she isn't alerted to Guy's NPC status by any of the many clues, like the fact that he can taste the ice cream. But his entire existence should have screamed NPC to her, since he was supposedly skilled enough to hack the game to give himself an NPC skin, but is somehow not skilled enough to know what the game was or how to do anything in it. And Millie was the AI programmer, so why did Keyes have to tell her that Guy is proof of her work being stolen? So, yeah, Millie's pretty dumb in this movie. But Millie's not the dumbest character. That would be Antoine. He's supposed to be an eccentric genius game designer who really steals other people's work and repurposes it into a new vision. But then, why hire Keyes? He starts Keyes out in the user complaint department, sure, but Antoine seems to want to promote him to coder. Why would you give access to the game code to the person from whom you stole that code? And why keep him around in any capacity when his partner is suing the company? Or after he catches him helping her? And why take an axe to the servers? Why not just unplug them? Doesn't he need those for the new game? Ugh, whatever. Keyes is also a very strange character. He has a love story arc that is entirely developed by a different character of the story, which still pays off for him at the end. Somehow. His crush is critically underdeveloped, and he makes no overt overtures until the end. Maybe characters are lower than I thought. 3 out of 10. In terms of cinematography, the design is pretty sleek. There are distinct differences between Guy's perception of the in-game world and the way it looks from any computer screen in the real world. The base game has a rather generic look, but it is infinitely complex, especially in NPC interactions. Players also seem to be able to craft their own spaces. Player customization is where the movie shows some real creativity. These choices give silent personality to the background characters, and diversity to the non-mission areas. There are also emote actions and other unlockables to add flavor. There are quite a few well-choreographed set pieces to admire. For example, the film starts off with a series of extremely long cuts in which Revengeman Buttons skydives into a sports car, then goes on a high-speed police chase. It's beautifully done and the CGI is rather seamless. But they don't all need to be this elaborate to remain well-designed. Here is Guy making a public scene about nothing in their world mattering because it's fake. The NPCs follow their preset paths with their preset dialogue. The traffic moves in the background and the foreground, ignoring Guy because he's now an anomaly for which the preset AI doesn't account. His tantrum draws the other NPCs' attention, but as soon as the punchline hits, everything goes back to the way it was. The reversion is the joke to break the tension of his outburst, solidified by the running gag of greeting Officer Johnny. This scene is put together just as well as the opening scene. The world feels like a real video game, with one major exception. There's no unintentional lag or glitching. No computer code is perfect, and not all hardware is created equal. There should be times when things don't work properly, for no reason. Now, there are glitches, which are well executed in the film, but these only happen when Antoine begins to sabotage things. Seems like a bit of an oversight to me. But overall, cinematography is a pretty solid 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie. It was well thought out, detailed, and oozing with love and care for the video game medium and the people who populate it, designers and players alike. The filmmakers showed respect for a subculture that often receives none, and demonstrated something that is often denied, that video games can be just as inspiring as other forms of storytelling. The video game setting removed a lot of the need for realism in a traditional sense, but the rules of the world were largely constant. The exception, of course, is the elusive kissing button, which didn't exist when Guy did it to Molotov Girl, but suddenly did when Molotov Girl did it to Guy. But I digress. Despite the fact that the ability to perform actions beyond the realm of reality is built into the fabric of the story, and indeed is part of the appeal, there's still a necessity for trial and error to build skills. And the underlying idea that whatever you gain from an experience cannot be taken away from you makes the story relatable. As an aside, I always appreciate references, and this film had quite a few. It's fun to pick them out, when they aren't smacking you across the face, that is. The one I probably like the most is the South Park reference. It's actually built into the whole premise. The Canadian-like NPC protagonist and his best friend are named Guy and Buddy.
We're not your buddies, Guy!
It's a small touch of fridge brilliance, but it made me smile to think about. This film is nothing to gush over, but it's a worthwhile watch. 8 out of 10 on enjoyment. Aggregating all of the elements, we land on a 6 out of 10 for the movie. It's fun and had potential, but squandered a lot of the elements that could have added depth. It's a decent popcorn movie for video game fans. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Am I being too harsh? Or too nice? If you liked this video, I would appreciate it if you click the little buttons below and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks again, and I hope to see you when the marathon continues.